Hi, my name is Eric, and I am the founder of SchoolData.ai, which operates under Formative Spaces, Inc. We focus on giving you the facts of schools and school districts. Our only agenda is providing parents with real source data to help you make the best decisions for your family. We do not work for any government agency and are entirely self-funded. In short, we have no conflicts of interest that would bias our work. Today, I want to talk about Westchester County within the state of New York, but not the version of Westchester that lives in real estate listings or neighborhood group chats. I want to talk about the version that shows up in the official data. Westchester is one of those places where school reputation has real financial consequences. A family starts looking for a home, and before long, the school district becomes part of the price. Certain names carry a premium: Scarsdale, Bronxville, Rye, Chappaqua, Edgemont, a few others, depending on who you ask. Those names are not random. Many of those districts do have very strong outcomes, but the problem is that families often treat reputation as if it were the same thing as data, and it is not. A reputation is a story people tell. Data is messier, but it is usually more useful. The official New York State Education Department data shows 137,729 K-12 public school students in Westchester County in 2024 to 25. Countywide, Westchester's public school students are about 39% white, 38% Hispanic, 11% Black, 7% Asian or Native Hawaiian/other Pacific Islander, and 4% multiracial. NYSED also reports that 10% of Westchester public school students are English language learners, 18% are students with disabilities, and 39% are economically disadvantaged. That is the countywide picture, and it already tells us something important. Westchester is not one school story. It is a collection of very different school systems sitting next to each other. The way most families talk about schools does not handle that complexity very well. A district with a narrow, affluent student population will usually look excellent on a top-line average. A district serving a broader mix of students may look weaker, even when some groups of students inside that district are doing very well. That is why the most useful question for parents is usually not, what is the district average? The better question is, what is happening for students most similar to my child, and what is happening for students who need the most support? For this episode, I am going to use Scarsdale as the benchmark because that is how many parents already think about Westchester. Scarsdale is one of the names people treat as shorthand for school quality. And the official data does show very strong outcomes there. NYSED lists Scarsdale Union Free School District with 4,691 K-12 students in 2024 to 25. The district is 55% white, 27% Asian or Native Hawaiian/other Pacific Islander, 9% Hispanic, 1% Black, and 9% multiracial. NYSED reports 2% English language learners and 15% students with disabilities. The economically disadvantaged figure is suppressed in the public enrollment table, which usually happens when the subgroup count is small enough to trigger privacy rules. On graduation, Scarsdale is exactly what people think it is. NYSED's district profile reports a 99% four-year graduation rate, with 99% also shown for the 5-year and 6-year cohort rates in the profile data. Scarsdale Senior High School is shown with a 100% four-year graduation rate in the NYSED profile data. So this is not an episode about pretending Scarsdale is overrated. The data supports Scarsdale's reputation on the measures we are discussing. But Scarsdale is also a very specific kind of district. Affluent, academically strong, and serving a student population with very low English learner enrollment compared with many other Westchester districts. It is a fair benchmark for excellence, but it is not a fair shortcut for understanding every other district. The more interesting question is what happens when we compare other districts to Scarsdale more carefully. Not by saying every district should have the same average, because that would be simplistic, but by looking underneath the average. What happens for students who are not economically disadvantaged in a more mixed district? What happens for students who are not English learners? What happens for former English learners after they have moved through language support? What happens in advanced coursework, Regents Pathways, and AP or IB classes? That is where the story gets more useful. One important note before getting into the districts: the official state data gives us different levels of evidence. NYSED's public graduation tables directly show subgroups, such as economically disadvantaged students and students who are not economically disadvantaged. They also show diploma types, including Regents diplomas and Regents diplomas with advanced designation. That gives us more than just did the student graduate? It gives us some signal about the academic pathway students completed. NYSED's downloadable report card database goes further and includes assessment results, participation rates, chronic absenteeism, Regents results, elementary and middle school, ELA, math and science, and other indicators. That database is the right place to do the full deterministic analysis of current academic achievement by subgroup. So when I say a district has a strong, non-economically disadvantaged story, I am going to be specific about what the data supports. In some cases, the evidence is graduation and advanced diploma data. In some cases, it is AP or IB performance. In some cases, the data tells us that the economic disadvantage lens is not the right lens at all, and that English learner status explains much more. That distinction matters. The whole point is not to create a new myth. The point is to read the official data honestly. Greenburgh Central is a good place to start because it is one of the districts that can be badly misunderstood if people rely only on reputation. NYSED's 2024 to 25 enrollment data shows 1,560K to 12 students in Greenburgh Central. The district is 50% Hispanic, 28% Black, 12% white, 6% Asian or Native Hawaiian/other Pacific Islander, and 4% multiracial. NYSED also reports that 48% of students are economically disadvantaged, 12% are English language learners, and 21% are students with disabilities. That is a very different demographic profile from Scarsdale. If someone only looked at the demographics, they might assume Greenburgh Central could not belong in the same serious conversation as Westchester's highest reputation districts. But the graduation data complicates that assumption. NYSED's district profile reports a 93% four-year graduation rate for Greenburgh Central. Woodlands Middle/High School, the district's secondary school, shows even more detail in the 2019 four-year August cohort graduation table. In that table, Woodlands had 132 students in the cohort and 125 graduated for a 95% graduation rate. The subgroup data is the important part. Woodlands' 2019 cohort shows 96% graduation for economically disadvantaged students and 93% for students who were not economically disadvantaged. Black students graduated at 97%, Hispanic students at 88%, and students with disabilities at 83%. That is not the usual story people tell about a diverse, mixed-income district. And the non-economically disadvantaged story is not simply that those students did well while everyone else struggled. It is actually more interesting than that. In this cohort, economically disadvantaged students also did very well. For a parent, that should change the way Greenburgh Central is understood. This is not a district where the only positive story is a small group of more advantaged students separated from everyone else. At least in this graduation cohort, the broader system produced strong completion outcomes across major groups. That does not mean we should overstate the evidence. Graduation data is not the same thing as third grade reading, middle school math, or Regents mastery. To make a full academic achievement claim, we would still want to extract the NYSED assessment data by grade, subject, school, subgroup, and participation rate. But Greenburgh Central clearly belongs in the deeper analysis. A family that dismisses it because it does not have the same reputation as Scarsdale may be missing an important official data story. Greenburgh also shows why parents should not treat English learner enrollment as a simple negative. NYSED's English learner data for Greenburgh Central shows a sharp difference between current English learners and students who had ever been English learners. In the table shown, current English learners graduated at 50%, non-English learners at 90%, ever English learners at 100%, and never English learners at 89%. That is a complicated pattern. Current English learners clearly need more support, but former or ever English learners appear to have very strong graduation outcomes in that table. For a parent, the lesson is not English learners are bad for a district. The lesson is that current English learner status and former English learner status are very different things. A district can struggle with students who are still learning English while doing much better with students who have moved through language services. The public schools of the Tarrytowns, and especially Sleepy Hollow High School, gives us another version of the same broader issue. The district average does not tell the whole story. Sleepy Hollow High School had 843 students in 2024 to 25. NYSED reports that the high school is 65% Hispanic, 27% white, 3% black, 2% Asian or Native Hawaiian/other Pacific Islander, and 2% multiracial. The school is also 58% economically disadvantaged, 16% English language learners, and 14% students with disabilities. That is not the student profile many people associate with Westchester's most famous school systems. But the high school outcomes are not what a simplistic reputation model might lead you to expect. In the 2019 NYSED graduation data for UFSD Tarrytowns, the district shows 91% graduation overall. Economically disadvantaged students graduated at 88%, while students who were not economically disadvantaged graduated at 95%. Non-English learners also graduated at 95%, while English language learners graduated at 50%. White students graduated at 95%, and Hispanic students graduated at 89%. This is exactly the kind of district where parents need to look under the average. The non-economically disadvantaged students in that cohort graduated at a rate that looks much closer to the top Westchester benchmark than a broad reputation summary might suggest, and the diploma type makes the academic story stronger. Among students who were not economically disadvantaged, 57% earned a Regents diploma with advanced designation. Among economically disadvantaged students, 28% earned an advanced designation. That does not mean every outcome is equal across groups. The English learner number is a serious concern. A 50% graduation rate for English learners in that table is not something to wave away. But for a parent trying to understand the district, the data says something more precise than good or bad. It says Tarrytowns has a diverse high school population, strong overall graduation, very strong graduation for students who are not economically disadvantaged, strong graduation for non-English learners, and a clear English learner challenge. The advanced coursework data also makes Sleepy Hollow more interesting. NYSED's AP and IB report shows strong AP performance in several subjects in 2018 to 19. AP Computer Science Principles had a 92% score 3 or higher rate among tested students. AP Calculus BC had 95%. AP Spanish Language showed very strong results, including 97% in one tested group. AP European History was 89%, and AP US Government and Politics was 83%. Not every AP result was equally strong. AP Calculus AB was much lower in the table. But the broader point is that Sleepy Hollow had visible advanced course success in a school with a much more economically and linguistically mixed student body than the classic Westchester prestige model. For parents, Tarrytowns is one of the clearest examples of why the top-line reputation can be too blunt. If a family's child is not economically disadvantaged and not an English learner, the official high school data suggests that the student may be entering a system where comparable students have had very strong graduation and advanced diploma outcomes. But if a family has a child who is an English learner, the same district data raises a different set of questions about language support, course access, and graduation pathways. That is the point. The right reading depends on the child. Ossining is different. Ossining's story is less about the non-economically disadvantaged row and more about English learner status. And that is important because it shows why one subgroup lens does not work everywhere. NYSED's 2024 to 25 enrollment data shows 4,730 K to 12 students in Ossining. The district is 69% Hispanic, 17% white, 8% black, 3% Asian or Native Hawaiian/other Pacific Islander, and 3% multiracial. It is 48% economically disadvantaged, 23% English language learners, and 15% students with disabilities. Ossining High School's NYSED profile reports an 80% four-year graduation rate, an 86% five-year rate, and a 90% six-year rate in the profile data. The increase from four-year to six-year graduation matters because it suggests that more students are getting to graduation over time, even if not all of them finish in the standard four-year window. But the most important Ossining story is the English learner split. NYSED's English learner page for Ossining shows 982 K to 12 English learners and 179 former English learners in 2023 to 24. The page also shows that English learners are overwhelmingly Hispanic and that a large share are economically disadvantaged. The graduation pattern for English learner categories is the part parents need to understand. In the data shown, current English learners are far below non-English learners, while ever English learners are much closer to never English learners. This matters because a current English learner is a student still receiving language services, while an ever English learner includes students who were English learners at some point but may have exited that status. Those are not the same educational story. For a parent, Ossining should not be read as a simple district average story. It should be read as a language acquisition story. A district with a high English learner share can look weaker in the aggregate because current English learners are still acquiring academic English. But if former English learners are graduating at high rates, that may indicate something important about what happens after students move through the language support pipeline. The next layer of analysis should look at achievement by English learner status, former English learner status, economic disadvantage, grade, subject, and Regents pathway. The official data structure allows that analysis, but it has to be done carefully. White Plains may be one of the most useful districts for parents to study because its data gives a more balanced picture than many people might expect. White Plains Senior High School had 2,239 students in 2024 to 25. NYSED reports that the high school is 63% Hispanic, 18% white, 12% Black, 3% Asian or Native Hawaiian/other Pacific Islander, and 3% multiracial. It is also 56% economically disadvantaged, 16% English language learners, and 17% students with disabilities. And now compare that to the 2019 graduation data. White Plains Senior High School had 544 students in the four-year August cohort, and 491 graduated for a 90% graduation rate. Economically disadvantaged students graduated at 87%, while students who were not economically disadvantaged graduated at 95%. Black students graduated at 87%, Hispanic students at 89%, white students at 96%, and non-English learners at 92%. Students with disabilities graduated at 73%, and English language learners graduated at 54%. The non-economically disadvantaged story here is very strong. Students who were not economically disadvantaged graduated at 95%, and 59% of them earned a Regents diploma with advanced designation. That is a meaningful academic signal. It suggests that for non-economically disadvantaged students, White Plains is not merely producing diplomas. A large share of those students are completing a more advanced Regents pathway. The economically disadvantaged data is also worth noting. Economically disadvantaged students graduated at 87% and 27% earned a Regents diploma with advanced designation. That is lower than the not economically disadvantaged group, but it is not a collapse. The district shows both a gap and a base of strength. White Plains also has visible advanced course participation. NYSED's AP and IB report for White Plains. Senior high school shows AP participation across subjects such as AP English Literature, AP Calculus AB, AP Calculus BC, AP Statistics, AP Biology, AP Physics C, and a P Spanish Language. The public table we reviewed gives course participation counts, and the deeper AP/IB database is the place to check subgroup level access and performance more fully. For parents, the White Plains lesson is practical. A family looking only at a broad reputation may underestimate the high school. The data shows a large, diverse school where non-economically disadvantaged students had a 95% graduation rate and a high advanced designation rate in the 2019 cohort. At the same time, English learners and students with disabilities show lower outcomes, which means the district is not equally strong for every group. That is a more useful picture than a single score. Yonkers requires a different kind of reading because it is so large. NYSED lists Yonkers City School District with 22,646 K-12 students in 2024 to 25. The district is 63% Hispanic, 15% Black, 13% white, 5% Asian or Native Hawaiian/other Pacific Islander, and 3% multiracial. It is 74% economically disadvantaged, 15% English language learners, and 21% students with disabilities. NYSED also identifies Yonkers as a target district in the state accountability profile. That label matters, but it is not the whole district. Large districts almost always contain major internal variation. Yonkers is not one school experience. It is many school experiences inside one system. The district-wide graduation data already shows more nuance than the label might suggest. In the 2019 four-year August cohort, Yonkers had 1,861 students and 1,637 graduated for an 88% graduation rate. Economically disadvantaged students also graduated at 88%, while students who were not economically disadvantaged graduated at 90%. Non-English learners graduated at 90%, while English language learners graduated at 62%. Asian students graduated at 96%. White students at 89%, Hispanic students at 89%, and Black students at 83%. The diploma type data adds another layer. Among students who were not economically disadvantaged, 29% earned a Regents diploma with advanced designation. Among economically disadvantaged students, 12% earned advanced designation. So the non-economically disadvantaged students are not dramatically different on graduation itself, but they are more likely to complete the advanced Regents pathway. That is exactly the kind of distinction parents need to see. At the school level, the story becomes even more specific. Yonkers High School's NYSED profile reports a 94% four-year graduation rate, a 95% five-year rate, and a 99% six-year rate. Yonkers High School is also not a low-need school. NYSED reports that it is 76% economically disadvantaged, with 13% English language learners and 13% students with disabilities in 2024 to 25. The advanced course data at Yonkers High School is also important. In NYSED's AP and IB report, Yonkers High had strong results in several advanced programs in 2018 to 19. AP World History had a 91% score 3 or higher rate. AP Chemistry was 74%. IB English HL had a 95% pass rate in the table. IB Spanish SL was 97%, and IB History HL was 92%. That does not mean every Yonkers school has the same outcomes. It does not mean every student has equal access to those pathways. In fact, that is the most important question for a large district. Who gets into which programs, who completes them, and how outcomes differ by subgroup. But it does mean that a district-wide label does not tell the full story. A parent looking at Yonkers has to read the system at the school and program level. The Yonkers takeaway is not that the district average is irrelevant, it is that the district average is too large a container. For a family with a student who might access a strong high school pathway, the relevant data may look very different from the district-wide reputation. For a student who is an English learner, a student with disabilities, or a student assigned to a lower performing school or program, the questions are different. Yonkers needs a map inside the map. Mount Vernon is an improvement story, and it should be treated with both seriousness and caution. NYSED's 2024 to 25 enrollment data shows 6,489 K to 12 students in Mount Vernon. The district is 60% Black, 32% Hispanic, 5% white, 2% Asian or Native Hawaiian/other Pacific Islander, and 1% multiracial. It is 76% economically disadvantaged, 21% students with disabilities, 9% English language learners, and 13% homeless students. Those are difficult operating conditions. Any comparison to Scarsdale that ignores those differences is not serious. NYSED's district profile reports a 79% four-year graduation rate, an 84% five-year rate, and an 83% six-year rate for Mount Vernon in the profile data. That is not a top-tier Westchester outcome, but the trend story matters. In September 2024, Mount Vernon City School District reported that its projected 2023 to 24 graduation rate was 79.9%, up 5.6 percentage points from the previous year, and described it as the district's highest graduation rate in more than 2 decades. The district also reported school-level projected rates of 82.7% at Mount Vernon High School, 93.5% at the Denzel Washington School of the Arts, and 90.7% at Mount Vernon STEAM Academy. The district attributed the improvement to data monitoring, transcript reviews, individualized graduation plans, credit recovery, Saturday Regents preparation, counseling supports, and intervention systems. This is not the same kind of story as White Plains or Tarrytowns. The non-economically disadvantaged lens is not the main lens here, partly because such a large majority of students are economically disadvantaged. The better parent-facing question is whether the improvement is real, whether it is broad, and whether it shows up beyond graduation. Are Regents outcomes improving? Are middle school math and reading improving? Are students with disabilities improving? Are the high-performing high school pathways accessible? Is the district's progress concentrated in certain schools, or is it spreading across the system? Mount Vernon should not be presented as if it has already arrived at the same outcome level as Westchester's strongest districts. The data does not show that, but it also should not be frozen in an old reputation if the graduation trend is moving. For parents, especially families looking at specific high school options such as Denzel Washington School of the Arts or Mount Vernon STEAM Academy, the district deserves a more current and more school-specific analysis than reputation alone provides. Portchester is one of the most important districts in this episode because it prevents us from forcing the data into a convenient story. NYSED's 2024 to 25 enrollment data shows 4,377 K-12 students in Portchester Rye Union Free School District. The district is 86% Hispanic, 9% white, 3% black, 1% Asian or Native Hawaiian/other Pacific Islander, and 1% multiracial. It is 76% economically disadvantaged, 40% English language learners, 17% students with disabilities, and 4% homeless students. If we were trying to prove a simple theory, we might expect the non-economically disadvantaged students to be the hidden high-performing group. But Portchester's 2019 graduation data does not show that. At Portchester Senior High School, the overall graduation rate was 74%. Economically disadvantaged students graduated at 77%. While students who were not economically disadvantaged graduated at 68%. English language learners graduated at 20%, while non-English learners graduated at 91%. That is an important correction. In Portchester, the economic disadvantage lens does not explain the graduation pattern very well. The language status lens explains much more. Non-English learners graduated at a high rate, current English learners graduated at a very low rate. For parents, that means the central question is not simply income. It is language acquisition, English learner support, and what happens as students move from current English learner status into former English learner status. But Portchester also has an advanced course story that should not be missed. NYSED's AP and IB data for Portchester Senior High School shows strong performance in several advanced classes in 2018 to 19. A P World History had a 92% score 3 or higher rate. A P Calculus AB showed 90% in one tested group and 80% in another. A P Statistics was 83%. A P Spanish Language showed very strong results, including 85%, 96%, and 96% across tested groups. IB English HL was 85%. IB History HL was 80%. And IB Spanish SL showed 100% in the groups displayed. So Portchester is not a simple negative story either. It has a severe English learner graduation challenge in the 2019 data, and the non-economically disadvantaged graduation row does not support the hidden affluent performance theory, but it also has real advanced course performance in certain subjects. That combination is exactly why parents need more than a rating. A rating would flatten Portchester. The data shows a district with major language acquisition challenges and also evidence of high achievement in specific advanced pathways. For a family, the practical lesson is clear. If your child is not an English learner, the district-wide average may be less relevant than the non-English learner and advanced course data. If your child is an English learner, the graduation data raises serious questions that should be asked directly. If your child is a strong math or language student, the AP and IB results suggest that there may be real academic opportunities, but none of those facts cancels out the others. They have to be held together. New Rochelle is another district where a single headline is not enough. NYSED's 2024 to 25 data shows 9,686 K-12 students in New Rochelle. The district is 54% Hispanic, 21% white, 18% black, 4% Asian or Native Hawaiian/other Pacific Islander, and 3% multiracial. It is 61% economically disadvantaged, 19% students with disabilities, and 12% English language learners. New Rochelle High School alone has 3,058 students. The high school is 55% Hispanic, 21% black, 19% white, and 4% Asian or Native Hawaiian/other Pacific Islander. It is 63% economically disadvantaged, 17% students with disabilities, and 9% English language learners. A high school with more than 3,000 students is not one experience. It is a large institution with different academic paths, different course sequences, different student groups, and likely very different outcomes depending on the student's program and support needs. That is why New Rochelle should be analyzed by pathway, not just by district average. The English learner data gives a useful example. NYSED's ELL page for New Rochelle shows 1,183 K to 12 English learners and 620 former English learners in 2023 to 24. The page also shows that Spanish is the dominant home language among English learners, with smaller groups of Arabic, Haitian Creole, Portuguese, and French speakers. It reports English as a new language and dual language programs in the district. The graduation data by English learner status is especially interesting. In the table shown, all students graduated at 84%, current English learners graduated at 36%, non-English learners at 88%, ever English learners at 91%, and never English learners at 87%. That means former English learners are not just catching up in the graduation data. In that table, ever English learners are slightly above never English learners. That is a major insight for parents. A district with a meaningful English learner population may look more complicated on the surface, but if former English learners are graduating at high rates, that tells a very different story about long-term outcomes. For New Rochelle, the non-economically disadvantaged achievement story still needs more direct extraction from the state assessment and Regents data. But the parent-facing point is already clear. The average is too crude. A 3,000 student high school has to be read through course access, Regents outcomes, AP and IB participation, English learner history, disability status, and college-going data. A family should not make a New Rochelle decision from a single number. If we pull all of this together, Westchester starts to look very different from the reputation map. Scarsdale remains the benchmark. It has a very high graduation rate, very strong public reputation, and a student population with far fewer English learners than many other districts in the county. That is real. But once Scarsdale becomes the only model of quality, other districts get judged in a way that can hide useful information. Greenburgh Central shows why a diverse, mixed-income district should not be dismissed. In the Woodlands 2019 cohort, economically disadvantaged students graduated at 96%, students who were not economically disadvantaged at 93%, and Black students at 97%. That is not a weak data story. It is a strong graduation story that deserves deeper academic analysis. Tarrytowns shows why the non-economically disadvantaged row matters. Sleepy Hollow High School is 58% economically disadvantaged, but in the district's 2019 cohort, students who were not economically disadvantaged graduated at 95% and 57% earned a Regents diploma with advanced designation. The AP data also shows strong performance in subjects like AP Calculus BC, AP Computer Science Principles, AP Spanish Language, and AP European History. White Plains shows a similar but broader pattern. It is a large, diverse high school, yet students who were not economically disadvantaged graduated at 95%, with 59% earning advanced designation. Economically disadvantaged students graduated at 87%, which shows both a gap and a meaningful base of strength. Yonkers shows why large districts need school-level and program-level analysis. The district is high need and officially identified as a target district, but district-wide graduation for students who were not economically disadvantaged was 90%, and Yonkers High School had strong graduation and advanced program outcomes, including high IB performance in several subjects. Mount Vernon shows why improvement matters. The district still has serious challenges, but its reported projected 2023 to 24 graduation rate rose to 79.9%, and several high school programs reported much stronger results. That does not make Mount Vernon comparable to Scarsdale, but it does make the district more current and more complicated than an old reputation may suggest. Portchester shows why we have to let the data choose the lens. The non-economically disadvantaged graduation row was not the hidden strength in the 2019 cohort. Non-English learner status was. At the same time, the AP and IB data shows real advanced course performance in certain subjects. So Portchester is neither a simple hidden gem nor a simple struggling district. It is a district where language status, timing, and pathway access matter enormously. New Rochelle shows why very large high schools need pathway analysis. The English learner data shows a major difference between current English learners and ever English learners, and the high school size means parents need to understand the student's likely academic path inside the building, not just the district's headline reputation. The practical conclusion for parents is not that every lower reputation district is secretly just as strong as Scarsdale. That would be false. The practical conclusion is that the headline average often answers the wrong question. If a family is looking at a mixed income district, the non-economically disadvantaged data may be highly relevant. In Tarrytowns and White Plains, that row shows very strong graduation and advanced diploma outcomes. In Greenburgh, the story is even broader because economically disadvantaged students also show very strong graduation outcomes in the Woodlands cohort. In Yonkers, the district-wide not economically disadvantaged graduation rate is strong, but the more useful analysis is probably school and program specific. In Port Chester, the not economically disadvantaged row does not explain the pattern, and language status is much more important. In Ossining and New Rochelle, former English learner outcomes may be one of the most important hidden stories. That is how parents should read school data, not by looking for a single winner, not by assuming that the most expensive district is automatically the best fit, not by assuming that a lower average means a child will have a weaker outcome. The better approach is to ask what the official data says about students who are academically and demographically comparable, and then to look at the parts of the system that matter for that child: grade level, subject, course access, language status, disability status, graduation pathway, and advanced coursework. The next layer of this research should be the full academic extraction. NYSED's report card database contains the data needed to examine ELA, math, science, regents, participation rates, chronic absenteeism, graduation, and post-secondary indicators. The federal civil rights data collection can add information about access to courses, staffing, discipline, bullying and harassment, school climate, and other opportunity measures. Together, those sources can show whether the graduation and advanced course patterns we see here are matched by current achievement data. But even before that deeper extraction, the Westchester story is already more useful than the reputation map. Scarsdale is strong, but it is not the only district with important evidence of strength. Greenburgh Central, Tarrytowns, White Plains, Yonkers, Port Chester, Ossining, Mount Vernon, and New Rochelle all show why parents need to look below the average. Some show hidden strength among students who are not economically disadvantaged. Some show broad strength across economic groups. Some show strong advanced course outcomes inside districts that may not have prestige reputations. Some show major English learner challenges but stronger outcomes for former English learners. Some show improvement from a difficult baseline. That is the real story. Westchester school quality is not one ladder from best to worst. It is a set of different systems serving different students under different conditions. The families who understand that will make better decisions than the families who only chase the famous names.